Hi everyone, this is Noreen Chase, the Community Manager of the SocialBizUG group. Joining me today is Steve McDonagh, a self-described journeyman geek. We'll have to ask him what that means, but also an upcoming speaker at the ICON UK event that is scheduled for September 21st through the 22nd in London, England. So like I've done before in the previous interviews, I'll be asking Steve about his professional background and a little bit more insight for his ICON UK session and the Geek Question. So let's get started. Hi Steve, how are you today?
Hello Maureen, I'm fine. Just about in the preparations for a geek charity event called the Dander for Dosh. So I have several other geeks having a lie down, and we're going to walk as far as we can in 24 hours, starting at 9 o'clock tonight. So this is why I'm in my kitchen rather than in my man cave.
24 hours, that's quite an undertaking.
Yeah, we're hoping to get between 50 and 60 miles, which is in one day, which is new for myself and Eileen Fitzgerald, who's coming with me. So we'll be pushing our boundaries somewhat.
Sounds like a lot of fun. So can you also give us some information about your professional background and how you became involved in this space? Yeah,
my professional background is somewhat varied. You asked earlier what a journeyman geek is. I'm firmly of the belief that you never stop learning. And a journeyman was someone who had fulfilled their obligation for apprenticeship and had yet to become a guild member, in like a carpenter or a plumber or a whatever. So whenever they were out gaining their reputation, they were called a journeyman, and I am a journeyman geek. Prior to being a geek, I was a nurse. I was fully qualified in Belfast in Northern Ireland in the 70s. And then I needed a job, and I saw an advert in the paper for the corporation that I work for to work in their IT department. And at that stage, I was probably a talented amateur would be the best way to describe it. I had a Commodore PET and a Sinclair ZX 81, and they were looking for somebody, and I thought, well, this would be a good stepping stone to a different career. So I applied, and strangely they gave me the job, and I was expecting it to last only maybe a year, and I've been just past my 31st anniversary with them. I started off as what was referred to as a printer monkey. I looked after very large chain printers. The corporation had an IBM 370 mainframe, which required a certain amount of looking after, and I looked after the printers and gradually worked my way up, and I've worked in operations, technical support, development, administration, and now I am my official title is collaboration manager, and I look after the collaborative infrastructure for the corporate environment within Europe and Asia. And I have been a Domino, and prior to that, Lotus, since version 1.5. I went away on holiday. We had CC Mail before that, and I went away on holiday and came back after 2 weeks to discover that I was in charge of the new Lotus Note server. I can't say I was overly impressed at the time, but it has seen me well for the last sort of 15 to 20 years. It certainly engaged me as far as the idea of collaboration, the whole concept of within the enterprise, and this is long before social became a buzzword. We had a very disparate workforce. We had salespeople. The company I work for is an electronic components manufacturer. So the big names like Apple and Bosch and Nokia back in the day would come to us looking for electronic components. and a lot of the design houses would be in Europe. So we would be dealing with design engineers for these big companies who were making a new washing machine or a new car or whatever. We'd be dealing with them within Europe, and then we would get onto bill of material, and it would go off to a manufacturer. And quite a few of these companies manufacture in the Far East. So we had field application engineers helping the design teams in Europe, but the final manufacture would be happening in, say, Shenzhen in China or Shanghai. So we had projects that spanned not only time zones, but different teams in different global areas. So we had to work out a way where the workforce was able to share, both within a sales and a technical side of things, share information pertinent to the job that they were doing. Now, initially we did that with QuickPlace, which then became Quicker, and now we're now doing it within communities and Connections, because we've only recently, within the last year, moved from an on-premises solution to a hybrid solution with Smart Cloud in the American network center and our own internal node servers for applications. So we've kind of run with the ball as far as IBM collaborative solutions are concerned, all the way from whenever they took over the Lotus and it became IBM Lotus, right the way through now to Smart Cloud. I would like to say the most challenging part isn't the technology. The most challenging part is actually enthusing the workforce. Lots of people like to be shared with. Very few people like to actually do the sharing. So we've been able to try. We've been trying over the last 20 years to I'm using the buzzword that we use now of social enterprise. The social enterprise, we've tried to make it so that there are good reasons for people to share. They're able to get information. There's a known place where they can go and find out things, where they can exchange ideas, where the enterprise is enabled to make ideas a good thing. Now, Bruce Elgort and his team with Idea Jam took that idea and ran with it, whereas we would have a similar thing, not using that same core process, but when somebody had an idea to enlarge a product range or something similar, they were given the tools and the ease of being able to do that in such a way that the right people found out about it at the right time. So that's basically where I come in. I'm both evangelist and geeky and techy enough to be able to facilitate that for the workforce.
I find it interesting that there seems to be a common theme with people in that trying to get users adopting the new technology. So you said you've been started with QuickPlace, now into Connections. So it seems like you've had this collaboration environment for a while. Has over the years, has it become easier?
The easier possibly in the sense that the tools that we have available to us now, back in the day with QuickPlace when it came out first, it was very well received, and then when it changed to Quicker, we got another set of tools, and now we've come to Connections, and we're relatively new. We're only about 6 months into the adoption of Connections, and people are immediately seeing the use of activities for day-to-day work control. They're seeing communities as the place to go to store those bits of information that are pertinent to the teams that they work, that they involve themselves in and work on a day-to-day basis. So yes, they're seeing the benefit of it, but the hard part, as I was saying, is lots of people will go, oh yes, I need to go to the sales community to find out about this particular customer and their likes and dislikes and the problems that they've had, but they're less likely to go and actually post something there. unless they see that there is a benefit to them. And that's to a certain extent this idea of gamification came in. And Femke and Saja, who are coming to ICON, are people who are very focused on that idea, is how to make it the same as, and I hate using comparisons with Facebook, but the idea of the Facebook-like or the Google plus one is that feedback loop to the person who is sharing to make them feel valued. And that probably is the hardest part.
It's gamification. We have that on SocialBizUGroup.org with participating. If you post a blog, if you complete your profile, you get a badge, and you accumulate so many points for the badge. And honestly, when I first was becoming aware of gamification, I was skeptical, but I'm a believer now, because there are other apps that I use that have a gamification component to them, and I find myself wanting to, play along to get to that next level.
Yeah, it's your inner 5-year-old. It's the I like to think of it as whenever when you were very young and you drew a picture with your crayons and you showed it to your mummy and daddy and they put it on the fridge. Mm-hmm. It's that fridge door feeling that even if you're in your 50s and 60s, having somebody go, yeah, that's good enough for the fridge door, that's a big plus. And people like that and they engage with that. So it's one of those things that as we progress, and certainly within the large corporations, like the ones I work in that are quite disparate, it makes it easier to reach out to the faraway people, to those people you may not see every day, the people who are perhaps getting you orders that you don't know you're getting. Mm-hmm. And you're able to interconnect in ways that we didn't initially see, and that interaction can be very synergistic. You can end up with it being more than the balance of its parts, and that is important whenever you turn around and say, right, I have to justify the dollars that this is going to cost for the next year. If you can turn around and it's not just a return on investment, but it is this is something we didn't expect to see, and we weren't sold it, but we have developed this new and interesting way of doing business.
That's great. And so you mentioned Femke going to ICON UK. I had interviewed her earlier, and that'll be on a separate interview posted on Social Biz. But let's get to your ICON UK session.
Yes.
It's entitled Adding Two Factor Authentication to IBM Connections Cloud. And this is interesting, since you just said your company is about 6 months, into this. So tell us a little bit more about your session and what you've been learning. Okay.
The corporation I work with, there are 3 major data centers. There's one in the States, one in Europe, and one in Asia. And the Asian and European environments have always collaborated using the Lotus product range. In the States, there was lesser of it, and they moved rather unexpectedly to Google about 2.5, 3 years ago. And they were very happy with it, but then again, they had never been particularly big on collaboration prior to that. And they'd always kept themselves to themselves. So they went to Google, and we found out then sort of about 2 or 3 years later, a year later, that they wanted us to go to Google. And then started, I wouldn't say a battle, but it was an interaction between the 2 collaborative platforms. And while Google, I think, is a perfectly good product, it is much more of a consumer-led product rather than an enterprise-led product. And we argued the case that because we have a very high investment in Lotus as a technology, that we had hundreds of applications that people are using every day on our app server, that we could argue the case that we could go to smart cloud, that what the corporate board would like would be for us to be in the cloud. And we made the case that the cloud that we should go with is the one that's the best fit for us. And this hybrid environment with our applications running on in-house servers and everything else running in the cloud seemed like the best fit. And we did a compare and contrast between Google facilities and Smart Cloud facilities. And Smart Cloud came out top of the pile for everything, apart from two-factor authentication. Now, for good or ill, that became an issue. Oh well, Google is more secure because it has inbuilt two-factor authentication, and Smart Cloud doesn't. Therefore, it's not as good, regardless of what other brilliant applications you had within the package. So I had a conversation with several people within IBM and said, right, okay, how can we leverage this? Because nowhere on the roadmap at that particular time was two-factor authentication being discussed as part of the cloud. And a very smart guy in IBM Dublin, Alex, said, well, you can federate your identity management to an in-house server. And as long as it sends back a SAML token from the identity server to the cloud, we're happy in the cloud. What you do prior to sending that is entirely up to you. So we had a bit of a time frame. It was last summer, and basically if we couldn't get two-factor authentication bolted onto the Smart Cloud, we were going to go to Google. It was as simple as that. So I spent about a month working with various products, open source products like Shibboleth, which is a Java-based identity management platform, and PHP using an open source product again called Simple SAML. And we built in a set of logic patterns that far outstrip what's available in Google, that allow us to whitelist IP addresses, blacklist IP addresses. We can work out whether somebody is accessing it from their iPad browser or their work browser or a browser in a cyber cafe, and we can act according to those bits of information that we gather from the user's connection. We can then say whether or not we want it to be two-factor authenticated. And we have got an Android, a Windows, and a Apple OS application that does the two-factor authentication. So after about 12 weeks in total, we had a few hiccups, and because nobody had done it before, there was nobody in IBM to help us. So we kind of had to invent it as we went along. And we got to the point where we managed to get a two-factor authentication engine that works beautifully, is scalable, and cost very little. Because we couldn't add to the cost of Smart Cloud, because again, one of the metrics that was being used was Google were coming in at just slightly over $50 per user per year, and Smart Cloud were coming in underneath that, but we couldn't add any more cost to it to supply this two-factor authentication because Google has it as part of their $50 per user per year. So we got together a server and the software, and we rolled it out, and now we have not our entire user base, but the user base that lives outside the firewall are now using two-factor authentication quite happily, and with a fairly minimal cost. I think the costing came in, ignoring my time doing the development, but the actual sort of ongoing cost of it is about $2,000 for the first year and about $500 for every year thereon. And when you divide that out by our users, it comes in at pennies a year. So it's a very workable solution for a problem that I believe, anyway, from my perspective, that IBM need to address, but they haven't as yet. And as far as the session goes, this is basically what I did last summer to get around this situation and improve, from our perspective, improve the security that we offer our users when using connections outside the firewall.
That's excellent. That is excellent. That's going to be a great, great session. Now, I was reading the abstract for your session, and I was wondering, as maybe a tip you could give from your session, what does fingerprinting the PC browser entail?
That is actually very interesting, and I'd love to claim the kudos of being able to do this, but actually the people at Berkeley University were looking at it from a slightly different angle. They were looking at it from how can we tailor the experience, the web experience of a user based entirely on where they are coming from. Now, not just you can get the what browser am I using, what IP address am I using, but what are the capabilities of that browser? And browser fingerprinting produces a CRC type hash of the environment that the user is in. Now that includes things like the plugins that are there inside, whether they've got Flash installed, whether they've got the IBM web plugin, whether they've got this, that, or the other. Now, from our perspective, from the two-factor authentication point of view, I wanted to know whether or not the user was on the browser that we had installed for them as part of their package on their work laptop. So they're off visiting a customer and they're on the customer's Wi-Fi. I can say with a factor of about 95% surety that they are using a work computer. And I can then apply that to the rules that we have for two-factor authentication. We don't want to be doing two-factor authentication on every connection. We want to do it only when certain rules are applied. And one of the rules was we would only authenticate from a particular browser instance once every 7 days. So we would only do the two-factor authentication once a week. But we had to know what browser, what device was being used. So this is where browser fingerprinting came in. And we couldn't just use the browser agent because that just says, oh, hello, I'm Internet Explorer. There could be Internet Explorer anywhere. But the browser fingerprint is about 95% sure that it can differentiate between different instances of browsers on different PCs. And one of the things it uses is really, really geeky and very smart. When you use the HTML option to create an image on the fly in HTML5, it produces an image, but every image is slightly different. Even if you put the same color background, the same foreground, the same text, it will be slightly different. And this is down to the GPU, the graphic processor unit, and the version of HTML5 you're using in the rendering engine. And in our tests, we've discovered that that is almost, but not quite, the perfect way of working out whether or not the browser is a new instance of a device browser combination or is the same one that they used last week. So, as I say, I'd love to claim the kudos of actually having developed that, but I didn't. Some very smart people in Berkeley University did. In the session, there is a link to that particular facility. It's only a 2.5K JavaScript file that goes out with the web page.
Oh, that is excellent insight into that. So, okay, so we've done your background, professional background, your ICON UK session. Time for the geek question.
Oh, right, okay.
So, this is for Game of Thrones. What would you rather belong to, House Lannister or House Targaryen?
I would say probably House Lannister. I would like to pick a family that is very moral and sort of does the right thing on every occasion. However, anybody that knows me knows that I'm not like that at all. If there is shenanigans to be had, I will be the instigator of it.
Nope.
So the House Lannister, I'm a bit tall to be some of the smaller versions of House Lannister, but I would probably fit in quite well with the general idea of getting things done, because the House Lannister does get things done.
That they do. I personally, I would be House Targaryen because I just like the dragons.
Well, yeah,
Dragons and take care of business.
yeah. There is the whole dragon thing, but the armor, the House Targaryen doesn't have nice armor, where House Lannister has some seriously nice armor. So.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, well, that's the end of our interview, Steve. Thank you so much for taking this time and joining me and the Social Biz community.
Not at all. I'm very happy to. I was told by Mr. Clark, who is the organizer of ICON, that I had to be nice. I wasn't allowed to swear. Oh. So I've been very good. I am known for my somewhat grumpy and inventive type use of language, shall we say? Oh. So I've been very good. My wife is sitting in the other room listening, so she would have thrown something at me had I sworn.
We would have seen something come flying across the screen. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I'll be going to ICON UK, so I look forward to meeting you there. And for the audience, there's still time to register for ICON UK. It is, I'll include the link to the event in the blog and here on the screen for you. And thank you everyone for joining us, and make it a great day.
And I look forward to seeing you and anybody else who comes to ICON in about 3 weeks.